Welcome back to the Making International Law in video series. In this video, I'll be explaining on Korean participation in overseas peacekeeping activities. Korea's engagement with the international community extended to humanitarian and disaster relief efforts through its participation in the UN peacekeeping missions. Korea began to participate in UN peacekeeping in order to fulfill its obligation as a UN member state, as well as to become a more proactive contributor in global affairs. However, as a rather later comer to the UN peacekeeping missions, Korea lacked clear and specific guidelines at the national level, thereby resulting in delays in troop deployments. The collaborative efforts by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of National Defense and the National Assembly resulted in enacting the law on participation in the United Nations peacekeeping operations on December 29, 2009. The UN PKO law became effective since April 2010 and supplemented by a related presidential decree in June 2010 to deal with requests for peacekeepers by the United Nations. As a legal framework for international peacekeeping activities was provided, Korea's decision-making process related to deployment of peacekeeping personnel became more transparent and predictable. The UN PKO law includes principles of mission performance and the legal basis for establishing the standing forces and parliamentary approval procedures for dispatching forces. As of January 2020, a total of 580 individuals have been participating in the UN peacekeeping operations as police members, UN military experts on mission, and staff officers and troops. There are two types of the overseas deployments Korea has been engaged. The first type is the UN peacekeeping operation, and the other one is the nation's participation as part of a multilateral force authorized by the United Nations or other international organizations or coalition of the willing. The key UN peacekeeping operations Korea participates are in Somalia and Uganda, in Western Sahara, and East Timor, and Haiti. The Korea's first participation in multilateral force was the Vietnam War from 1964 to 1973, which was also its first overseas deployment of its armed forces. Korea also deployed its armed forces as part of a multilateral force to the Persian Gulf War, Afghanistan, and Second Iraq War. This type of mission conducted by Korea included medical support, transports, or engineering units for assisting multilateral forces. The Korean Civil Military Operations Unit in Iraq, known as the Zaitun Division, was comprised of over 3,500 personnel and carried out the peacekeeping and reconstruction missions in Iraq, Kurdistan from the 2004 to 2008. This mission was the biggest overseas deployment after the Vietnam War and credited for its contribution to the stabilization and economic development in Iraq. In 2007, Korea's decision to join in Lebanon and involved in the first deployment of a Korean combat unit into UN peacekeeping operations. From July 2007 onward, Korea broadened its options in terms of the type of the mission Korea undertake, such as increasing number of troops committed, the scope of their work, or the area of operation. Korea's participation in UN peacekeeping does not necessarily relate to its own security interests, as Korean units are widely dispersed in places where the security implications for Korea are not readily identifiable. However, from the military perspective, Korea's participation in UN peacekeeping provides valuable opportunities for gaining operational experience in multilateral cooperation techniques. Korea particularly devoted to multilateral diplomacy at the United Nations and gradually pursued bilateral diplomacy even in the multilateral forums such as the G20 summit. Moreover, Korea utilized its UN diplomacy to extend the scope of its global participation in major goal agendas. 이거 다시 하겠습니다. Korea particularly devoted to multilateral diplomacy at the United Nations and gradually pursued bilateral diplomacy even in the multilateral forums such as the G20 summit. Moreover, Korea utilized its UN diplomacy to extend its scope and its global participation in major global agendas, including, but not limited to, human rights, environment, terrorism, and poverty. The hosting of the major international forums such as the G20 Seoul Summit, the 2012 Nuclear Security Summit, and the fourth high-level forum on aid and effectiveness in 2011 showed the Korea's national capacity to serve not only as global agenda setter, but more importantly, as a bridge builder between developed and development countries. Factors that mostly influence the Korea's multilateral diplomacy are geopolitical reality and the growth of Korea's overall national power. With the increase of the Korean public interest in global affairs and employment at international organizations, the Korean government put in great effort to raise its profile in international community by providing employment opportunities through international organization recruitment center within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Korea concluded a bilateral agreement with the United Nations for participation in the Junior Professional Officer JPO program, whose main goal is to enhance the capacity development work of the United Nations and other participating agencies. Since Korea's the JPO program was introduced in 1996, it has significantly contributed to the advancements and subsequently increased in number of Korean nationals working for international organizations. According to government statistics, the number of high-ranking positions held by the Korean nationals at the UN organs increased from 10 in 1999 to 26 by the end of 2017. This number includes the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. It has been also reported that more than 480 Korean nationals are working for 59 different international organizations. Korea continues to stick to the principle and norms of multilateralism, international cooperations, and armed conflict resolutions, and at the same time pursues the way to contribute to international community by focusing on newly emerging global agendas such as the transnational decreases and diseases and preventive diplomacy and human security. Let me touch upon the Korea's ODA history. The ODA means that the Overseas Development Assistance. Following the Korea's war, Korea was a major recipient of the Overseas Development Assistance from foreign countries, whose assistance ranges from emergency relief and structural readjustment programs. As a war-torn country in the 1950s, the Korea received assistance mostly in the form of military support and humanitarian relief. In the 1960s, Korea promoted economic growth and foreign investments as it strived to change economic structure. While Korea was still an ODA recipient country in the 1960s, Korea, as a donor country, hosted training programs for public officials of the developing countries. While ODA in the previous decades mostly took the form of a grant to facilitate reconstruction, more concessional loans and forms of financial investments were provided to Korea. This type of the financial assistance allowed Korea to build social infrastructure and promotes the industrial development in the 1960s. During the 1970s and 1980s, the stand-alone project financing was introduced to the heavy and chemical industries, which consequently enabled Korea to reform the overall economic and industrial structure. In 1977, Korea, for the first time, utilized its own budget for equipment provision worth of approximately $2 million then. The amount of ODA provided by the Korean government reached a new peak in the late 1980s, subsequently culminating in establishing the Economic Development Corporation Funds in 1987 and the Korean International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, in 1991. In the 1990s, the Korea turned out its position from the recipient to donor. Korea enabled its dependencies on the World Bank assistance in 1995 and was excluded from the Development Assistance Committee list of the ODA recipients in year 2000. In 2010, Korea became the 24th member of the DAC, the International Donors Club. Upon joining OECD DAC, Korea laid a solid legal ground to improve its ODA system by enacting the Framework Act on International Development Cooperation in 2010. International Development Act identified following 5 basic principles of the Korea's international development cooperation in Article 3 as follows. The first, reduce poverty in developing countries. Second, improve the human rights of women and children and achieve gender equality. And third, realize the sustainable development and humanitarianism. And fourth, promote cooperative economic relations with developing partners. And fifth, push peace and prosperity in international community. In addition to International Development Act, there exist several laws related to specific ODA agencies and activities. A legal framework to facilitate the international development cooperation is as follows. The Act on Measures for the Admission to International Financial Institutions, regulating membership with the international financial institution, and measures to discharge the responsibility as a member in respect of the international financial institution. Economic Development Cooperation Fund Act, regulating the establishment, cooperating, and management of the Economic Development Cooperation Fund as a concessional loan. And Korea International Cooperation Agency Act, establishing the Korea International Cooperation Agency with the task of the implementing Korea's grant aid programs. Overseas Emergency Relief Act, prescribing the methods necessary for overseas emergency relief, support for interim recovery from disasters, and so on. Korea's ODA program consists of 3 types of aid: bilateral grants, bilateral loans, and multilateral assistance. The bilateral grant is comprised of the technical cooperation and various types of transfers in cash, goods, and services without requiring obligations to repay. Bilateral loans, on the other hand, provide on concessional terms under the name of the Economic Development Cooperation Fund. Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Finance are responsible for multilateral assistance, which is provided either as financial grants or contributions to international organizations.